What you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Foot Candle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Foot Candle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson. With me is Chris Fry. We are with the Foot Candle Film Society and the annual Foot Candle Film Festival, which for the first time in several months, we're able to say is not coming up anytime soon. Well, unless you consider next fall soon. We're kind of in that period of time now where we don't have to pimp up the festival. You got a few months break from us on that before we start talking about the festival again for 2025. But we're here for this podcast to review some films and share some movie news of interesting projects coming up. Chris, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. I've recovered from the festival, and I have a little bit of a cold, but I'm getting over it. So my voice may be a little bit more odd than normal. So apologize for that.
All right. Well, thank you for the heads up on that. So it's nothing contagious, right? I mean, We don't think so. Okay, good. Because you are like really literally
I am right
two and
across
a half
the table.
feet away from
Yes,
the table from me.
it's true.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So on today's episode, we are going to be reviewing the newest film from director Jason Reitman about a television institution. It is the film Saturday Night. We'll be discussing that film in just a moment, followed by a couple of news items that we have to share with you. Both of them are upcoming films. Actually, there may be trailers associated with both of the films we're going to talk about. But just to talk about some interesting projects we've come aware of and are going to be coming to the multiplexes or the TV streaming scene. I don't know if these films are streaming or theater films. We'll find out together when we talk about them here in a little bit. And then I think we're going to be closing out the episode with a Chris Fry recommendation. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
I have one. Sure.
All right. Good. People have been waiting. I've gotten emails. There's been notes online. People are like, when's the next recommendation from Chris? And I'm like, well, just people hold on. He's a busy man. He's got a lot going on, but want to make sure we got that recommendation in this episode. And we will.
Yes.
A film recommendation from Chris at the end of the episode. Okay. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start the countdown to our review of the 11:30 show of Saturday Night.
Okay, let's see if we can get through one of these skits.
Sketches. Davey, please.
Okay, you ready, camera one? Oh!
Maybe, motherfucker. You want me to break your fucking
Okay, do we go again?
Actors on their mark.
My name is Lorne Michaels. I'm the producer and creator of Saturday Night. We're excited because there's never been a television show like this.
Okay, but what kind of show is it, Warren? Do you even know what the show is?
Did anyone ask Edison what a light bulb was before he harnessed electricity?
October 11th, 1975, 10 p.m. The writers are inebriated, the set is on fire, the sound system is wrecked, the actors are physically assaulting one another, the crew is in open revolt. They have 90 minutes to figure it all out, or the network is pulling the plug. Recorded from the Mesh Studios in Western North Carolina, it's the Foot Candles Film Podcast. Cue co-host Alan Jackson. What did you think of Saturday Night?
Oh, that was really good, Chris. Yeah, I like what you did there. And it's actually really close to 11:30 when we're reviewing. We're recording this. It's 11:30 a.m.
Thankfully.
Yeah, right. It would have been a little tough at night. What did I think of Saturday Night? Okay, so Chris, let me, if you'll give me a moment on
Sure.
this. Because I was the one who brought this up a few months ago that this film was coming out, brought it to the attention of the show. I was at that point a little frustrated that I didn't know about this film earlier, kind of jokingly frustrated. But the reason being, I am a huge Saturday Night Live fan. I've read all the behind the scenes books and biographies of the people involved. I've been watching since at least probably 84, 85, I'd say, on a somewhat regular basis. So I'm a big fan of the institution. I'm a big fan of the idea and the concept.
So your parents were letting you stay up later than they
They
should
were a
have.
few times. Yeah. Like when I was getting, middle school, high school, I was staying up. I was watching this. And so I was really excited when this film came about and heard what it was going to be like. I was also excited that it was Jason Reitman directing it, just because of his comedy family pedigree with Jason Reitman, or with Ivan Reitman being his father and being involved in a lot of projects. It just sounded like a great fit. The cast sounded really interesting. So, yes, very excited. I'm going to go ahead and tell you my review is a little bit on the loaded side because of all that past history. My opinion and review of this film may be somewhat exaggerated in one way or another because of that personal history I have with the show. So just take that with a grain of salt. But I love this movie. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I had a great time with it. It has issues. It has flaws, plenty of them I can happily talk about with no reservation. But I will say this worked for me, probably worked for me better than it's going to work for a lot of audiences because of that aforementioned history and all that. But basically a film like this, Chris, is either going to do one of two things for me. It's either going to be a massive disappointment or it's going to be an exhilarating experience. Not a lot of gray area in between for me, although it will be gray area for a lot of the audience. This was on the exhilarating side for me. So I had a wonderful time with this film. Can talk about it for quite a while. I can definitely go into details, and I will be happy to explain things that I also don't feel like worked very well and were some issues with the film. But that's just my personal opinion. I want to hear from someone maybe not quite as enamored with the show and its history as I am. So, Chris, does that fall into your category? And can you tell me what you thought of Saturday Night before we get into specifics?
Probably I have not read books on the cast members and stuff, but I've watched an inordinate amount of hours, specifically of the older stuff. Back when it was the Comedy Channel and not Comedy Central, they would show full reruns of Saturday Night Live. So I saw the very episode that they were trying to make in this movie where it starts off with John Belushi on. I've seen the very first episode.
Yeah.
I think I've maybe seen the first 3 or 4 seasons. I don't know. I've seen a lot of old Saturday Night Live. And then like you, I stayed up later than I should have, middle school, high school. Yes, first thing Monday morning, my friends and I would just sit there and rehash the entire Saturday Night Live episode. So yes, and now recently, probably since the departure of people like Will Ferrell, people like that, I haven't been as much of an acolyte for Saturday Night Live. I catch up on it basically maybe every 4 years when they do the mimicking of political candidates. That's when I'll tune back in because it can make me laugh about something I otherwise don't find very funny and kind of frightening. So, I'm maybe not as much in love with it now as I have been, but definitely the time period that this film covers and, the people that went on to be huge stars in their own right.
Sure.
Definitely a fan of.
Okay.
And I remember when we saw the trailer, I as well knew nothing about the movie, saw the trailer and I was like, wow, that looks interesting. That looks like it could be good. The intro that I basically put together for this review was basically stolen from one of the promotional posters that and it kind of gives the film kind of the crux of the entire film, written by Gil Kenan and Jason Reitman, and as you mentioned, directed by Jason Reitman. It felt like, to me, a West Wing episode transposed onto 30 Rock, which, if that appeals to you, great. For me, not really. It kind of took the joy out of the comedy that was Saturday Night Live. It was interesting for maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes. But then after that, it just became more people yelling, shouting obscenities, walking down hallways, conversations that kind of bubble, attempts at kind of like a Robert Altman type thing, which I guess then West Wing did. I never watched West Wing, but I've heard people talk about the Aaron Sorkin, thing. And then he went on to write scripts for other movies that I do like the Facebook movie. But basically, I just kind of numbed out because it was just the same thing over and over again. And not to mention suspense. We're at the 50th anniversary of this show. So I know that the first show went on the air and 50 years from now, you can't really make me suspend my disbelief that it happened. So that was also a problem. So I won't say I was bored, and I think it just basically for me, it all comes down to the script. That's what I can kind of say. The script was not interesting to me. And I think the execution at first, okay, we're going to make it stressful. Okay. But after, I guess I don't enjoy being stressed when I already know the outcome. It's like if you're watching a race and you already know the person's going to win, or watching a college basketball game for the national championship, but you already know who's going to win, then regardless of what happens, especially if it's done in like trying to give you tension and you already like, and faked tension, because this is something that is not live. It is, edited, and did all these things actually happen? I don't know. I kind of hope so, because if not, then you're just throwing things in to heighten tension when when it doesn't need to be. Like there's some things with Milton Berle that I wonder if all that really took place. There's Chevy Chase's girlfriend, actress, maybe first wife, don't know. And like, was she as much of a looming presence over the set, like a Yoko Ono? And was it that intense? And I also feel like you take shots at the people that now, Milton Berle, he's deceased, I believe. Chevy Chase, who's kind of not he's a person non grata, I think, overall in Hollywood. People think he's a little bit of an ass, and maybe some other things he's done, which I'm not familiar with. Those people are portrayed badly, whereas the people that seem to be portrayed positively, cue Dan Aykroyd, he, not long after this film came out or whatever, he was like, oh, this film is great. Speaking as someone who was there, it's just awesome. And I'm like, okay. But then I wonder if then you don't really hear from some other cast members. And he was apparently, from what I understand, one of the few people that got to see the script before the movie was shot. So I feel like basically wasn't that entertaining, pretty self-serving. Now, gone a bunch of negatives. I will say the strong part of this film and why it remained as interesting as it was for me was because I was familiar with who these people were portraying. Now, pretty much most people, I would assume, know who Dan Aykroyd is, know who Chevy Chase is. But if you're not as familiar with, say, Garrett Morris, Lorraine Newman, Jane Curtin, some of these other, then I could see the film really not being because they don't really set up who these people were or why they were funny or I knew that because I said, but it's requiring. It's kind of like going to see a Harry Potter book, or going to see a Harry Potter movie. If you haven't read the book, you get kind of the general thing, but overall you might not find it that entertaining because you haven't read the book. Mm-hmm. So having seen the show was equivalent to having read the book. My wife was like, yeah, I kind of got bored because I didn't understand who all these people were. I had to kind of clarify to her who Dan Aykroyd was. I mean, she knew who he is as an actor, but she'd never seen these people as young as they were portrayed. And she hadn't seen the early Saturday Night Live stuff. But to get to the praise, the people doing the portrayals of the cast, I thought did an amazing job. Corey Michael Smith, who does Chevy Chase, Dylan O'Brien, who was unrecognizable to me. But then I was like, okay, I get it. That's who that guy is. He was in the Maze Runner, but I haven't seen him or I haven't seen a lot of him in a long time. He did Dan Aykroyd. There's just, it's good. I do not want to spoil anything, which, surprise, Saturday Night Live does happen. They have had 50 years of it. I will say my favorite part, again, without spoiling anything, was Nicholas Braun, him of Succession, his performance in this movie. And I'm going to leave it at that because I knew he was... I wasn't going to say that.
All right. That's fine. Anybody who's seen the trailer can figure it out. But anyway, yeah.
So I thought that was cool. And then there's kind of like I thought that was cool. And you could, say like paying tribute to some of the reasons maybe they did that or like, But I think there again, this movie's for fanboys, which I guess I'm not. I like Saturday Night Live. I admire it. There was a period in my life when I was like probably the biggest fan, now not. So I would say like if you are a fan, a big fan, like you are, of Saturday Night Live, and I think you continue to be, then yeah, this film is for you. Otherwise, I'd say, probably skip it, especially too. And this is not the fault of anybody. It's not, I said the script was the main problem, but advertising and marketing, I guess they did a good job because they made it be more of like a tense, like, how is this going to happen? And I should have taken that more to heart. So this is on me, because when I was like showing my wife, hey, let's go see that, billed as a comedy, I was like, I think that's the other thing. I was expecting to laugh more, and I didn't. And actually the times that I did laugh, it was because of things that I already knew, Saturday Night Live bits that I'd already seen. But I was like, yeah, but I was hoping to actually laugh at something I hadn't already seen before. And I'm not even talking about in the trailer. I'm talking about, classic bits that, just, I don't know. So it was disappointing. I'm not going to say it's a terrible film. I think it just depends on what you're going in for. If you're going in for more of like a history lesson on how the sausage is made and you're not wanting to laugh, then okay, that may be more your thing. So,
wow.
So there you go.
That was a very long, protracted discussion by Chris Fry.
Yes, it was my monologue.
As I will just go say, leading into it, I obviously had a very different experience. Partially, it's skewed by my own personal opinion and my own personal likes and desires on what I wanted from the film. Because, yes, I totally understand everything you were saying. I think there are some issues where if you don't know the background of any of this, it can be probably a very bewildering experience watching this film, because so much of it is hinging on you having some understanding and knowledge of the characters, a little bit of what the mechanics were in the background going on. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I totally accept that and agree with that. I also think, I think the film tries really hard to go with this breakneck pace. And that's its intention. It's got 90 minutes. It's going to try to cram in and just try to give you this feeling of exhilaration happening for this entire time. There's some moments where it breaks with that, where I did not like what it did. It tried to go into some exposition with characters, kind of some dialogue backstage between some characters that are purely meant to try to give you a little more insight into people's relationship. And it wasn't necessary. It kind of ground the film to a halt a little bit for me. And I didn't feel like it was in the true spirit of what the film was trying to do. I also have a little bit of an issue where I feel like some of the actors it's just a bit young for the characters they're playing. And it brought me out of the film a little bit. I'm talking mainly about the lead, Gabriel LaBelle, who is really good. But he's playing someone 12 years.
He's playing Lorne Michaels.
He's 12 years younger than Lorne Michaels was at the time of this. Lorne Michaels was in his 30s when SNL started, not in his 20s, which Gabriel's like 21, 22 years old. And I do feel like it played a little bit. There was a little bit between him and Cooper Hoffman playing Dick Ebersol, where I just felt like it was a little bit more of like we're watching young people kind of trying to play older, and it didn't quite work for me as well.
Okay.
It's not their performance's problem. It's just the casting. The casting was just a little off the mark. I wanted that for the performers. The performers are all young, 20-somethings, and they were perfect. Those two, though, I needed them to have a little more gravitas with their age and presence, and I didn't quite get it that I felt like it needed for their two roles. But their performances were good, given the casting that they were assigned for these roles. Okay.
Interesting that you point that out, because that's an example, and you have some knowledge that you can bring to it, whereas I didn't. I didn't think about, but that's an example of something that I feel like they're trying to add drama to the situation by skewing these people 10 years younger to make it like, oh, here are the young upstarts trying to make this thing, when you say Lorne Michaels was 30.
He was like 31, I think, or
Okay.
something like that. So almost 10 years older. than
Okay, so
what
like
Gabriel
that right there kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way. But as you are saying, it's not the performances, because one of the moments that I did like that gave me a break from just people walking down hallways and long dolly shots or long steady cam shots, which, okay, and like talking and conversations going everywhere was, and it was shown a little bit in the trailer, but I still found it satisfying, was a stairwell conversation between Dick Ebersol and
Yep.
Lorne Michaels, played by, the gentleman you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because it kind of like, even though it kind of stated, here's the purpose of why you should care about this movie. Is this going to work? And yeah, we knew, but like, it was almost like an Oscar moment type thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was well done, but I can see what you're saying, how knowing some of the history, it would kind of, not.
And it's not
be a
even
little
just
weird.
knowing the history. It's that, we're okay. Lorne Michaels, played by Gabriel LaBelle in this film, has a interesting relationship with,
Yeah, it's,
God, I'm
well, the
screwing up her
act, I
name.
can tell you, Rachel Sennett's the actress.
Right, that's
so
the
Rosie
actress.
Schuster is
Rosie
who she was
Schuster,
playing in
that's
the
it.
film.
The two
or
of
is
them
her
have-
last name Michaels?
Yeah, the two of them have a backstory that, granted, you don't need to know it.
I feel like that didn't work for me. I thought
Well-
it was just more annoying than anything else.
I think in the scene of exposition I was talking about that didn't work for me is it was Rosie Schuster having a dialogue with Dan Aykroyd kind of backstage in the midst of all this, where they kind of stop and basically give the audience an explanation of what Lorne and her relationship are like. And it's like, okay, that ruined the whole, I want to learn through your actions and how you interact with each other. I don't want to learn from you telling me what's going on with your relationship. I thought it worked with regardless, but to buy that Lorne and her had this work relationship for many, many years, which they did in real life. They worked together for many years on different projects before.
I'm assuming they wouldn't
to
put that
SNL.
in if it was completely fake.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
Right.
But again, that was one of those things where it was a little harder for me to buy, going back to my one criticism there, that the two of them are so young in actors wise in their portrayal.
Yeah.
It made it hard for me to believe, oh wow, so I'm supposed to believe that these guys have been like partners working together and were married for several years. I couldn't quite grab it, because I'm like, this guy Gabriel LaBelle looks like he's 19 years old. So I'm having a hard time grasping that they have this rich history of all this time together, and now they've kind of come to this point. Anyway, that's a casting question. I thought Gabriel LaBelle was great. It's just, I just thought he was cast too young for this role. Okay. I think all the performances were great. I thought they were all really, really good. If anything, I will say this, Gabriel LaBelle, I want him in more things. I want to see him do more work because he's really good. I think Rachel Sennett was really, really good as Rosie Schuster. Just, again, I felt like those two in particular and Dick Ebersol were all cast a little too young.
Rachel's, I did watch the trailer. We watched it here on the show. I guess I didn't pay enough attention to the trailer. There was a lot going on in the trailer, which I guess is good. I did not remember / know that Rachel Sennett was in this.
Yeah.
And so then when she is, it was actually maybe a little distracting for me because I feel like in a way she was, I like Rachel Sennett, but I feel like she was playing a very Rachel Sennett role. And so it was kind of distracting for me. Not that I hadn't seen Gabriel LaBelle because, the Fabelmans, he was awesome in that. Yeah. But I guess, I don't know, for some reason, I guess I haven't seen him as much. And I've seen Rachel Sennett in tons of stuff.
Right.
And so seeing her in this, it was kind of like, I almost wanted her to just be somebody, I wanted her to be more of an unknown, I guess. Not that Gabriel LaBelle is not.
I think for most audiences, she is an unknown. So that's the thing.
I guess that's my fault. Because she's more of an independent darling. She's been in several movies.
She's been in like 4 films. And they just are 4 films. You've happened to probably have seen all 4 of them. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like, oh. And then for her to be as big of a part where... Okay, and this is just me. Okay, the people, which I think is natural, maybe, the people that I care most about are the cast members because they're the ones that go on to be famous or to have fame and to drive this show. Yes, I'm sure Rosie Schuster, she did some writing, she helped, behind the scene. But the people, I guess, I care about the famous people. I care about Lorraine Newman. I care about Gilda Radner. And specifically those two, I felt disappointingly so. Lorraine Newman, I understand she's not as much of a household name. She's, people know her maybe a little bit because she was a cast member, but Gilda Radner, and just like such short shrift. And actually, to be as much of a force as I'm thinking people consider him to be, Belushi, I felt like was surprisingly kind of sidelined as well. And it basically is like Aykroyd and Chevy Chase's movie. And then like, not movie, but it's like they focus on them as like, here are the funny people. And like a little bit was interesting, but it's all about the men. And like Radner and Lorraine Gilda and Lorraine are sidelined. Like Garrett Morris, I did appreciate because I knew nothing about him other than seeing him on the show.
Yeah.
And getting some of the background meat on him, but interspersed well, unlike what you were saying was done with Rosie Schuster. I did appreciate that. So there is stuff to appreciate. I was disappointed that it was so male heavy, but I guess it's the 70s and things were male heavy. So,
well, I actually had in my notes, I was surprised. I actually kind of got it a little differently. I felt like all of the cast, I was okay with it being more heavy on the production side of the show and not on the cast itself. Because I feel like that's the natural thing you go to when you want to do a film like this is, everybody wants to pay attention to the cast members that are famous. I actually thought they did a really good job of all the cast members. Do they all get a lot of screen time? No, they don't. Actually, I felt like they were all pretty equal. Even
Gilda
Belushi.
Radner and Lorraine Newman?
Yeah. Compared to like what everybody else had, I didn't think Dan Aykroyd had that much to do. I don't think Belushi had that much to do. I don't think Chevy Chase had that much to do. I think they were all in there about the right amount, and they all had one beat moment for each of their performances that kind of stood out a little bit. The one I thought got a little bit more airtime, and I was okay with it, was the one you just mentioned. It was Garrett Morris, Lamorne Morris. And I think that was probably okay because he had the most interesting backstory during this 90 minutes leading up to it. I felt like it's this whole question of why am I here? What is my role? What's my purpose? Because I mean, that has actually been a criticism people have had about his role in Saturday Night Live in the early years.
Strip away the hyping of like, is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? Strip away that and make it more of something where you focus on Garrett Morris and his struggle of why am I here?
Yeah.
What is my place here? Which they did, and make it more central to his character, bring out some more of the cast. And I would have been, I would have liked it more. But they're running down hallways, cursing and just all that. The set's on fire and the lights fall down and, are we going to get the brick facade built in time? I'm just like, okay.
Oh, but that was such a great metaphor for leading up to the 11:30 showtime though. So I don't know, Chris, it worked for me on all those things you just read on. Yes, they all worked for me. I liked the breakneck pace of the film. I liked the walking and talking, constant action, constant motion going on. I liked I know where the shoot was going. I knew they were going to air at 11:30. I wasn't but it still did a good job of building up some tension for me, even if I didn't know that. I mean, even if I did know that going into it, I don't know. I think it really worked. I think it worked really, really well. It builds to this 11:30 showtime, and the film does run, quote, in real time. I think there's some graciousness to that by all means, but I think the intent was, by the time we got to 11:30 in this film, I kind of understood that, look, there's a little bit of a fantastical element to this being woven into this narrative, and I'm okay with it. I don't believe for a second that everything came to that 11:30 exact minute the way it did in this film. But by the end of the film, I was more bought into the concept of what was happening as opposed to the actual mechanics of, okay, did this person really say this at 1 minute to 11:30? Did this final brick get laid a minute before time? No, it becomes more symbolic.
Did John
at that.
Belushi actually come out on cue instead of them waiting 20 seconds and then he came out on cue? They added that for the movie.
Yeah. But I understand it becomes a little more fantastical as it gets closer to the end. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. Some of the best biopics, some of the best reenactments have to weave in some elements of that. And I think it was more about the idea. There's a scene towards the very end where you've had all these characters that have had their own issues and complications and fights and arguments and distractions and all that. But when it got to be like 2 minutes to showtime, there's some scenes, couple things in particular. There's a singing bit with Garrett Morris, played by Lamar Morris. There's the bricks. I'm just going to say the bricks, where there's more people kind of getting involved in something. And it's like, it's fantastical, but it worked because, again, that's what it was trying to share in the story, is that this thing was kind of a miracle that got pulled off the way it did. Now, was it as miraculous as the movie depicted? No, I know it's not. I've read the backstory. I know what stuff was real and what's not. But it captured the tone and it captured the spirit of what was trying to happen here. And that's what I wanted out of the film. And I think it delivered in spades on that end. I've got issues with some of the casting. I've got issues with some of the expositional scenes that didn't work and some of the dialogue that felt kind of forced in just to kind of clue us in, on more things that I didn't feel like were needed, because I felt like they were handled pretty well naturally. And yeah, there is some fantasy involved in that last closing minutes, but overall, the spirit of what this film was trying to do and the concept and the energy that it kept up, I felt like the entire time was exhilarating for me. So I really, really enjoyed it. But I also fully acknowledge I'm a fanboy. Yes, I'm going to have a more extreme opinion probably of this. And if this film had not worked for me, I would be tearing it apart, savaging it right now, because it's either going to be I loved it or I hated it. I don't think there's a middle ground I could pull off with a film like this from my personal experience and my love for the show and the institution. So anyway, I'm very happy with the outcome.
Good. I wish I was happier. It's, yeah, I would say too, to kind of put some positives, since I obviously had a tirade of negative, the production design, the costume design, the editing, the score by John Batiste, which I did not realize. I saw like Billy Preston. I was like, God, that guy looks familiar. I'm like, oh, that's because that's John Batiste. And then he's like did the score, which they kind of used some of the elements of that in the trailer, and that drives attention. I think hopefully that will get noticed at Oscar time, because I think it is really well done.
Yeah.
So there
I thought the music was great.
Like I said, the people doing the casting, it's just, it comes down to the script and just, I don't know.
Well, I love the fact that we haven't seen Jason Reitman make a film like this.
That's true.
Which I thought was impressive, because it's a completely different filmmaking style. It's a completely different pacing style to a film.
Yeah.
And it does have a bit of an Altman-esque quality to it, where you kind of have to, after the first few minutes, realize you don't have to try to pay attention to every line of dialogue that's being uttered by people. That's not as terribly important as it might be in other films. It's really more of the experiential. You're just kind of thrown in this mix, and you pick up what you want to pick up and you see what you want to see, but it's an experience film as opposed to a strict narrative structured film, I felt like. And so that, for that purpose, it worked really well for me. So yeah, I'm highly recommending it. I will highly recommend it to fans of Saturday Night Live. I will mildly recommend it to people who are not fans of Saturday Night Live, because I do think it's a tougher watch and a bigger chore not having some of the background information about these characters. And it can be an overwhelming and could be boring for people who are not as big of fans of the show. So I totally get that. But for fans of the show, I think it's great. I think it's a lot of fun and good film. And I love films too that really do trot out some actors I'm not familiar with, younger actors in some key roles. So again, you mentioned Dylan O'Brien. Yeah, I know Dylan O'Brien. I've seen him in some things, but I never thought of him as a actor. And he's really good as Dan Aykroyd. Emily Farron plays Lorraine Newman. Never seen her before. I thought she was great. Matt Wood is John Belushi. I think John Belushi is a little different than what people would expect to see, but based on everything I've heard, it's pretty much how he was backstage, and that was pretty spot on. So I liked his performance in that end. I really liked Lamar Morris's performance as Garrett Morris. Mm-hmm. I thought he was probably the standout for me. I think he just nailed it. He knew the role, he knew the part, and he had the most to chew on too from an acting standpoint, I thought.
And I think, yeah, Yeah, I guess I'd mentioned the guy that Nicholas Braun. I was but outside of him, I guess my other favorite part was the kind of the progression of Lamorne Morris's Garrett Morris character and how he was able to.
And Nicholas Braun was awesome. He was so good.
Garrett Morris he's kind of doing a sound check. That was actually one of the few laughs that I heard in the theater was his performance of that song. And I, of course, found it funny as well, but I wish I hadn't already known, because I guess they eventually did use that in a show.
It was a skit in like the second season.
Okay, so and because I've seen all the scenes, so I was like, oh yeah, it's this song. Now, did I realize that me thinking this is what's distracting for me? I'm like, okay, did he totally make that up on the spot because Billy Preston then like joins in and kind of does like the music, like, or was that something that he had as a bit all like, that's what's for me, because I actually care about it. I'm like, oh wow, was that just something he did like as a one-off soundtrack? And like, I didn't know I don't remember who threw it to him, whether it was Gilda or Lorraine, who's like, oh yeah, Garrett does it, because he had mentioned the comment about like, I've done opera. And she's like, oh.
Because that was a conversation he and Gilda had.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, okay, so she was thinking, oh, he's going to do something comedic with like doing an opera thing, which would have been also funny. But then he brings out that, that song. Yeah. And I was like, oh, cool. But I don't know. I guess where I wanted to be informed on the history, it was unfortunately muddy. So I don't know.
All right.
But I think, like you've said, if you are a huge fan of the show, you'll probably enjoy it. Just know, I guess, the structure of it being kind of a West Wing and maybe getting more, like you're saying, behind the scenes instead of comedy specifically from the cast.
Sure.
So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that is Saturday night. It is playing in theaters. I don't know how long it will be. I was really surprised it got as wide a release as it did, but it's also not really tearing up the box office either. So it's probably going to be a little short-lived in theaters. The good news on that means that it is one that will be available online for streaming, maybe a little sooner than later, which I'm happy about. So, because I'd like to see this again. All right. So that's Saturday night.
And it was kind of cool. I got to see it the same weekend that like 50 years before the show had premiered, because they did the release date that way on purpose.
On October 11th.
So I was like, well, that's kind of cool.
It was cool.
So
it was kind of wild when the title card shows up at the beginning of the movie. Because I was watching it on the 14th, so I didn't quite see it on the day. But if you were watching it on October 11th, that was kind of cool. So.
So I guess, this expectations, whereas interesting, we saw this trailer, expectations were high. We talked about on the show, and my expectations were too high. For the and it wasn't able to. Whereas it seems like it met and exceeded yours. So
yes.
that's good, I guess.
I had two sets of expectations. Either I was, like I said, going to love it, or I was going to despise it. And it met the love expectation.
I wouldn't say I despise.
No, but
don't get me wrong. I don't despise this.
If the movie didn't work, I would have despised. I would have been so mad because, again, I don't want a bad film put out. It's like the way I felt about the Steve Jobs 2 films that came out when Steve Jobs biographies came out. There was the one that starred Ashton Kutcher, which I hated, and that was made me mad. Honestly, mad that was a film that was out there. Then you got the Fassbender one that was done by Danny Boyle, which I thought was okay. And I've watched it actually 2 more times since then just to see if I can find a way to love it, because I want to love it. And I haven't quite loved it yet. So anyway, that's where I am. When there's something I'm really passionate about, I want a good movie done. It's going to make me mad if it's not done well. But if it's done well, I will be over the moon for it. And this was a done well, over the moon film for me. Yeah. Okay. I think we have exhausted our opinions on this, I believe. That is Saturday night. Chris, let's move into a
So
break.
we should cue like the slow clapping and the band going dun 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 dun. Okay, thank you guys, everyone. They do at the end of the show. Come on, at the end of every Saturday Night
the
Live
closing,
episode.
the standing
Yes.
credits at the
Where you
end,
have
and the
everybody
thank
kinda
yous.
slow clapping.
No, we're not at the end of the show yet.
No, but the end of the review.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. But we're kicking it to a musical act for a break, and then we'll come back to more of the show. We've got some news to cover of some upcoming films here in just a minute. We're going to take a quick break. We come back. We'll be right back with Foot Candle Films. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. Chris and I exhausted our conversation on Saturday night. I think we're done with that. I don't think there's anything else to bring up now. We are good. Let's move on to talk about some new films that will be coming out in the very near future. Chris, you brought one trailer to the table here, and I'm going to match you with one here in a second as well.
Okay.
But let's talk about the one that you brought up that you want to talk about. This is a film coming out soon. I am reading it right now for the first time. I know nothing about this film, never heard of it. Do you have any setup for this?
Sure.
Or,
So we're going to watch the trailer for The Legend of Ochi, I think is how you say the name Ochi. And I've seen the trailer, Alan. It's kind of a Gremlins meets E.T. in an A24 joint. So
Okay, well, it
leave
sounds like a winner to me.
So it sounds.
I like
rather-
E.T. I
has-
like Gremlins.
Sounds Finn Wolfhard, Emily Watson, and Willem Dafoe, and someone who I'm not familiar with, who I think is maybe the lead, Helena Zingel.
So Finn Wolfhard and Willem Dafoe, both in the aforementioned Saturday
Yes.
Night that we just reviewed.
That is true.
Didn't even mention either of their performances. That's fine. Let's skip it.
Yeah, we're finished talking about.
We're done.
that, right?
We're done. We're not going to do it. Okay. So let's watch this trailer. The Legend of Ochi is an A24 film, as Chris mentioned. Let's take a look. Here we go.
On foot, boys.
Dad, are we going to see one?
Stay close by my side.
I was born on a small island in the Black Sea. People say it's a dangerous place. There are bears and wolves and something else. Something people fear is much worse.
Right. Well, that was the trailer for The Legend of Ochi. Yeah, Chris, I'm on board, man. That looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it's in one sense, like I was kind of saying, like it made me think of Gremlins, made me think of E.T., but the mere fact that A24 is doing it, who's not known for doing like, oh, cute little family films. I mean, granted, they did Marcel the Shell, but, you know,
It's just
I
got a
don't
little
know,
more to it. I mean, I love the production
Sure.
quality of what I saw.
Sure.
It looked very unique, kind of a unique setting, a unique environment around them. The characters look a little more caricatures, especially the Willem Dafoe demented Boy Scout leader type of thing he's playing.
Right.
Yeah, no, it looks great.
It's very stylized, which, you know,
That makes it elevates it a little bit more for
right.
me.
As
than
opposed to just being like
a
a standard thing. The fact that you can tell through like production design, costume design, and it's just has that
little more going on.
Yeah.
No, I'm on board. So do we know anything about when
I
the
just
film,
saw it coming soon. I don't know if they have a.
Hold on, I'm looking to see if I've got a date on this. And
this is literally,
just coming soon.
This is literally the first I'd heard. Like the trailer just dropped. Today's the 16th of October when we're recording this, and it was the first I'd heard of the film. So
what I'm seeing right now is February 28th.
okay,
So a few months, but upcoming American fantasy adventure film written and directed by Isaiah Saxon in his feature film debut.
oh cool. So it's an emerging filmmaker as well. Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm on board. I'm curious, anxious to see it. That is The Legend of Ochi coming out February 28th. All right, Chris, let me flip over to a film that I've heard a little bit about, and I really hadn't read or watched anything about it, but I'm curious, and I'm not saying I'm excited because unfortunately I've got to base this film off of this director's last film.
Got you.
That didn't work for me.
I think
That was the film Longlegs.
you and I were both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did not work, but it was from Oz Perkins, who was the director and writer of Longlegs. Now, Longlegs just came out, earlier this summer? Spring, late spring, early summer?
Early summer, something like that. Yeah.
So already there's another film he's got coming out in February. So he'll have one like within a year, actually shorter than a year from Longlegs coming out.
It's crazy.
And this one is going to be a horror film as well. It's called The Monkey. And my understanding is that it is
It's based on a Stephen
King short story.
Yeah.
Based on a short story by Stephen King from producer James Wan. So you got some producer talent in there as well. And then Osgood or Oz Perkins writing and directing the film called The Monkey. It is starring Tatiana Maslany, Elijah Wood, and some other actors I'm not familiar with. But Elijah Wood and Maslany, I do know pretty well.
I recognize her name. What do I know her
So
from?
she's mostly been TV. She was in Orphan Black, the TV show. She was the lead actress on that. And she was the She-Hulk.
Okay. That's where I know.
That's the two shows she's kind of known for.
Got you.
I'm not familiar with any film she's been. I think she's done some film work, but I'm not familiar with her roles in anything. Okay. We also have actor Theo James playing two brothers, kind of the star of the film, playing brothers Bill and Hall.
So
I don't know
twins,
him either.
Yeah,
Theo James. And then we have the rest of these. So they say supposedly it's kind of a humor horror film. It's supposed to be a little quirky, a little more funny, which I don't think Longlegs was funny, at least intentionally. So let's take a look at the trailer for The Monkey and just see if there's anything to this or not.
Do we know if this is a teaser or is this a trailer?
I am hearing that this is the second teaser that I'm getting ready to show you.
The first teaser, I think, was just like kind of like a obscured shot of said monkey and like a slow zoom in and like titles.
Oh, hopefully this is more than that. So let's take a look and see. Here we go. The teaser trailer for The Monkey coming out in February. So I will just go ahead and say I am more in favor of this and seeing this as a film to come out than I was Longlegs. So good.
Yeah. Interesting. I think we can both agree. I was also not a fan of Longlegs. Yeah. But you and I, let's get some positive here. We both can agree that Osgood Perkins has a visual style that is very strong.
Agreed.
Okay. I think Osgood Perkins also knows how to make a good trailer.
Yeah.
And I will say what gives me, this one seems to be, from what I can tell, seems to be a little bit kind of leaning into, like you were kind of alluding to in the intro to it, a little bit more of a kind of comedy. I mean, it's horror.
Comedy horror.
But it has like this kind of winking, like, you kind of know things are going to happen, like, oh, kind of like the scenario when people separate, even though you know they shouldn't separate in a horror film. You're like, that's going to end badly. Like the winking scream type humor. Seems like this has that going on. The trailer looks funny, even though you kind of get like, oh, the monkey, and it kind of is like a what's that franchise, which I've never seen any of, where you know the people are going to die. What is it? It's a horror franchise, and they've had like
Final Destination.
Yes, Final Destination. Yeah. And so you know that it's like, okay, this person's gonna die, and then like, of course, they end up dying, and like they die these horrible, gruesome deaths. So even though, kind of like Legend of Ochi, even though we're like, yeah, it's a horror film, people are dying, blame it on the monkey, but because it's so stylized, and even the music used in the trailer, Stephen King tends to he likes all sorts of music, but a lot of times in his writing, such as like the short story Stand By Me, he talked about older tunes, and this is like, come on, baby, let the good times roll. And like they use it, but the way they use it in the trailer is so funny. It sets the mood a little bit, but then just the way they kind of, it's just, I don't know. It has me, it does exactly what a trailer is supposed to do. It gets me excited about the film. My only, I guess, gripe would be, I wish I had a film to look forward to go see in October that was supposedly like a good horror, but yet funny type film.
Yeah.
And this isn't coming out until February.
In February.
So I'm a little bummed, but you know.
Well, if this helps in any way, and again, we'll just take this as you will. Stephen King has notoriously not been someone always in favor of the film adaptations.
This is true.
His work is attached to.
The Shining.
Yep.
Shining example.
He has, according to his Twitter,
Okay.
been helping promote The Monkey, like sharing the trailer and sharing people's compliments of it who have seen it early. So he's on board. That's a positive, I think, in general. So good. We'll see what happens with that.
Cool.
All right. That is The Monkey and The Legend of Ochi, both coming out in February. I assume both of them going to theaters. It looks like both of them are getting theatrical releases is the plan.
I think so.
So that's good. Okay. So 2 films to look forward to, or at least be curious about as we get closer to February 2025. All right, Chris. Well, that's all the news we had. So we got to kick it right over to our final segment, which is your recommendation. Chris, what film are you recommending for us that we ought to check out?
Sure. I'm going to recommend a documentary that premiered at Sundance this past year, and it just recently has become available. I think it did a small theatrical run, but it is now widely available on Paramount Plus. But it is Casa Bonita, Mi Amor. And if the name Casa Bonita sounds familiar, then I'm going to assume that you were somewhat of a South Park fan, because this restaurant was featured. It is a documentary about a restaurant, but this restaurant was featured in a South Park episode from 2003. So that was a while ago. But it is a real restaurant. It was joked about in the South Park episode, but it is a real restaurant. And Trey Parker and Matt Stone, both being, from Colorado, they actually went to this restaurant as children. They really, loved it. It opened in 1974. So years later, I think basically the pandemic kind of took it down. I mean, I think it was the final nail in the coffin that took it down. And if you are a fan of like HGTV, or let's say maybe your wife's a really big fan of HGTV, loves watching those home renovation shows where they go and redo something, or maybe your parents, you want to watch something with your parents and they're a big fan of those type shows. You're like, I feel like but maybe you like South Park. So this is the film for you. Yes, it does have profanity. Imagine that. Trey Parker and Matt Stone in it. But it shows you they come in and they decide to buy this restaurant because it was going into bankruptcy and try to make it come alive again. And it's just, it was really, even though kind of like Saturday Night, you kind of know what the end result's going to be. I mean, if you search the web, it's now 2024, you can find out what happened. But it was still really gratifying just to see, specifically, Matt Stone cares, but Trey Parker really cares. And to see somebody who is very successful and they have this childhood kind of dream and like, you know what? Regardless of what might be a good decision, I'm going to do this. And you're just like, if only everybody who had ridiculous sums of money did something that actually didn't really benefit them, but they just kind of wanted to make the world a better place. And granted, is he making the world? Well, no, he's making this one strip mall in South Park, or not South Park, but Colorado a better place. But he's like bringing back an icon, and it makes the people in the community really happy. So it's kind of like it's a R-rated feel-good movie, R-rated feel-good documentary movie, because at the end, I think you do walk away feeling good. And you gain a little bit of insight maybe into Trey Parker and Matt Stone if you're fans of the show. But I found it way more entertaining than I thought it would. Hey, and here's another thing. 88 minutes, folks. So
get the Chris Fry length duration award.
Right. So under 90 minutes. So, but that's Casa Bonita, Mi Amor, and it is streaming on Paramount Plus. I recommend it.
On Paramount Plus.
Yes.
All right. So just one of those. We got to have the subscription, or at least sign up for a free trial if you haven't done it before.
It may be on VOD as well. That's how not how I came to see it, but it might be accessible through that. But it's definitely on Paramount Plus.
All right. So. Well, I'm all for people. Look, sign on for 1 month.
There you go.
For these streaming services. do the trial if they give you a trial, or a worst case scenario, you just get 1 month of it, cram in everything you need to see on that service that we've been recommending for that particular service, and then cancel it at the end of the month, and you're out and you're done. So, all right. That is Casa Bonita Mi Amor. That is Chris's recommendation on Paramount Plus documentary. Yes. Look, I visited this restaurant.
I am so jealous. It is now on my bucket list for sure.
Yes, no, I was there. I took the family there. We did a cross-country trip, and that was one of the destinations that I made sure we stopped at.
Amazing.
And I'm trying to remember exactly when it was when we went. It was at least 7 or 8 years ago, but it was, it was in the 2010s.
I hear you have pictures. I want to see them.
I do have pictures. Absolutely. I have pictures. So I'll have to bring those out, and we'll enjoy those. Okay. So that should do it for us for this show. So we had our review of Saturday Night. Some differing opinions on Saturday Night, but that's okay. It's all good. That's what
I have to say. I think that is one of our biggest discrepancies in a while. I think I kept my emotions in check and I listened patiently to your tirade.
Opinions,
you did.
I respect people's opinions. Yes, it's all good. As much as I may disagree with them, I can still respect them for
fair
sure.
Enough.
So Saturday Night, we had a review of that. The trailers for The Legend of Ochi and The Monkey, both coming out in February. We talked about both having some interest in to different degrees of those two films. And then Chris's recommendation of Casa Bonita Mi Amor on Paramount Plus. All right, Chris, if anybody wants to chat with us, they want to pick a side on the Saturday Night split
Debate,
here.
yes.
How do they get a hold of us, or how do they keep conversations going?
You can send an email to info@footcandle.org. You can also follow us on Twitter @FootCandleFilm. Facebook, we're on there as Foot Candle Film Society. Instagram and Threads, we're just simply Foot Candle Film. And we are also, last but not least, on Letterboxd, where we try to track what we're seeing and leave quick takes. Do us a favor. If you like the show, consider giving us a star rating or writing a review on whatever service you get your favorite podcasts on, because it'll help us reach new listeners, and we would always appreciate that.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll look forward to talking to everybody next time. Take care.
See you in the ticket line.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch films out of the reverence of the heritage of an art. Watch films through the courtesy of Foot Candle Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.